All right, music fans, welcome. Harmless Dave here on the Harmless Dave channel, talking about real music and doing it in real time for a few real people out here, just like you and just like me. So, this is going to be kind of a controversial video. All right. And some people are going to get mad at me, but I'm kind of used to that at this stage. I mean, I could just talk about how awesome the weather is out today, and people might get mad at me. So, in any event, could this Rush tour, what they're calling Rush, obviously, missing the greatest drummer probably in rock history, um, could this Rush tour be a disaster? That's the focus of this particular video. Geddy Lee is 72 years old. I didn't know he was that old. I thought he was still in his 60s, but he was born in 1953, and just turned 72 not that long ago, back in July. And people were leaving comments on that viral video I did, which shouldn't have been viral, but thank you, algorithm, for doing that. Um, and they were saying, 10 years ago, the last time Rush was out there, vocally, he was struggling. And he set the bar extremely high for himself to pull off this music, whether they're going to employ some artificial intelligence, which will probably make Rush fans go ballistic. I don't think they should do that, but they might have to. And there will be some casual fans who attend who will be like, it was great. Getty sounds amazing. And they're not going to know, or they're going to be okay with being fooled. This is a new thing where, people post stories and they want to believe the stories are true and they're happy. And then you tell them, no, those Facebook stories about whatever topic that you want to be true aren't real. They're fake. I mean, it's beyond okay. So we had one level of fake news, which I'm going off on a little tangent here, so I'm sorry. So the one level of fake news is your version of something that happened. But now we've got a new level of fake news, which is projection, basically putting out news and information that people want to be true but isn't true. It might turn out to be true at some point. So you're giving people, high doses of hopium, and it's just bizarre. And in the case of the band Rush, the ticket prices, which are insane. Yes, they added tour dates, and somebody said, "You're going to talk about the fact they added tour dates?" Okay, I just did. All right, they added tour dates, and there are going to be people who say to themselves, selves or self, I have to buy a ticket to this. This will be the last time, maybe, that you'll be able to go see Rush. And so the critics, and there are many, are saying, is this really Rush? Number one, legitimate concern. Yes, it's Rush. It's definitely Rush in name only. It's a rhino. But it's Rush. Getty and Alex obviously retain ownership of the name, and they're taking the brand back out on stage, and good for them to some degree. They know they can make lots of money, and I've heard Getty talk about how he misses performing, and that was a big thing not too long after Neil passed away. Is we really miss being out here, but I think their better angels at the time realized that Neil was too big for this thing to keep going. In other words, his absence makes this really difficult for Rush to go on. And I think that was actually the right decision based on everyone's age. Now, what you're going to be trying to do is give the fans, I guess, some closure. But again, I'm seeing this with other classic rock bands. Do you want to be remembered as the band who stayed too long because, you wanted to do this for the fans or for the money or whatever motivation it was, but you weren't even 50% of your former selves up there. And you're going to get arguments, pro arguments on the other side saying, well, 50% of this is better than zero. So I'm going to go see it because they're legendary. This music is going away, which is true. You're not going to be uh, seeing any new bands that sound like Rush or even come close to sounding like them. So I get it, you know. But this is why I keep saying there should have been a next generation of bands like this, but the music industry shifted away from this kind of music, number one. And number two, some bands just have their own thing completely. And Rush was one of those bands. And so to bring it back, it's risky, but I guess it's motivated by wanting to continue, which I understand. But sometimes you got to retire. Sometimes you got to quit. Um, it's like a husband that loses a spouse. It's some people don't want to try to find another spouse because their spouse was so incredible. They just want to remember who they were married to and how awesome that was. And it kind of trashes the memory of that by go looking for another one. Now, in some cases, um, it works out and people find new love and so forth. But the other issue here, and it's kind of the elephant in the room, is the female drummer. Okay, I had a lot of comments, people saying, "Oh, this is a Canadian band. Maybe this is a DEI hire." And if you don't know what DEI is because you're not politically plugged into what that means, go look it up. I'm sure you're going to get the Google definition, and it's going to be all positive and rosy. This is why the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame keeps putting in people like Cyndi Lauper and the Go-Go's, and because they feel as though they need to put in more women, not because the women deserve to be in there, but because they need to kind of, level the playing field and just put in on merit, put in based on, is their body of work good enough, and is it better than a bunch of other people that should go in before you? Were there other drummers that, quite honestly, would have had higher name recognition? Maybe they would have been closer in style to Neil. Probably not, because he's one of a kind. So bringing in this wild card female drummer that nobody knew was probably a good strategy to some degree. I mean, people weighed in on it, and nobody really knew who she was. And the experts came in. I saw some of those guys who, do this for a living, where they know all about style and technique and everything. And they're all pretending that they knew a lot about her. But for the most part, she's sort of an unknown quantity. Yeah, you can go sample. I sampled her work. I thought she was really good. But is she worthy to replace probably the greatest rock drummer in history? I don't know. Then that's why you should have just shut this thing down. Why have to compete with that? Every vocalist who's been in Journey since Steve Perry walked away from it. Some people told me that Steve didn't walk away. They walked away from him and whatever. But nobody's been able to live up to that. And in this case, I just don't think anyone's going to live up to Neil. But, maybe I'll be wrong. I'll be proven wrong, and this will be the greatest Rush tour that's ever been. But I think people are a little skeptical and a little concerned, especially based on ticket prices. And you should have pretty high expectations if you're paying all of that money to go see these guys. And will they, and this is the other thing that I think would really tarnish the legacy of this band, is if Geddy can't pull this off vocally, and people were telling me 10 years ago he was struggling, all right? And I didn't pay that much attention to Rush 10 years ago. I knew they were still around. I took it for granted. They're always going to be around, and they'll play until they can't play anymore. But if he was struggling 10 years ago, he's 72 now. What's it going to be like for him going out there? And will this band use artificial intelligence Will they pipe vocals in? Will they auto tune? I mean, that to me would just destroy and trash the entire legacy of this band. Not completely, because people can always go back to the good old days and say, this is when they were really playing their music. And so, again, why do you go out there and risk your legacy? Here's why: money and pride. Okay. Because you believe you could still do this. And to some degree, I'm sure he can still play bass and Alex can still play guitar and will sound great. But for all intents and purposes, your glory days are over. And they were over when Neil passed away. So those are my thoughts on this. And this is no disrespect to this woman who appears to be a great drummer, and no respect to all the fans who love this band. But these are questions that should be considered, especially before you decide to purchase a ticket. Now, I'm sure all of it's going to sell out, and the rock media will be celebrating how amazing this is, no matter how it sounds. And I'm probably going to be waiting for Wings of Pegasus and their analysis of the vocals when they're able to do that, because I can almost not guarantee, but I'm pretty certain that they're going to be employing some outside intelligence, if you want to call it that, or some artificial intelligence. And it's sad, because this is why we loved this music, because it was real, because these guys could make great records, and then they could perform and make these records come alive in concert. And back in the day, and you got to go way back, apparently, we didn't even suspect any chicanery was going on. We knew it was all legit, and maybe we took that all for granted too. This is again why I'd probably rather go down the street to a blues bar and hear a great guitarist and a great bass player and kind of an unknown band that gets in the minivan and drives around the country and performs these gigs where they probably break even or make a couple of $100 each, and they go on to the next location. Those are the people who are doing this legitimately, who aren't using any extra technology, and who aren't into all the glitz and the glam and the big stadiums and the merch tables. They might be selling T-shirts, but you're going to have to ask some dude in the corner who's sitting next to a little table if you want to purchase a CD or a T-shirt, and they're probably like $20 each, or even lower. They might even be like 10 for the CD and maybe 17 for the T-shirt. For like $27, you could have that stuff, and for like $20, you can get into the concert. That money won't buy you half a ticket to go see Rush. So that's just my own preference at this point in life. I wish these guys the best. They're legends, and hopefully their legacy won't be trashed uh, during and then maybe after this tour. And hopefully this is going to be it. But if this goes well, my guess is it will go on. And the longer it goes on, I don't know. I just people need to stop at some point. And for the legacy of the greatest drummer who probably ever was, please don't trash his legacy. But some people will say this is honoring his legacy by continuing, because he'd want you to continue. We'll see. We'll see how it all works out. Maybe it'll be fine. It'll be great. And people will be saying, yes, more Rush, and hopefully they'll make some music and they'll go out there again. And this is, again, why we need a new generation of rock bands to come along and, supplant all of this older stuff, which just can't go on forever.